Do you feel like the quality of your masters has plateaued? If so, it might be time to change your strategy. In this video, we'll cover an innovative way to master that results in the cleanest, punchiest, and most professional sound. And I'll show you a step-by-step method for setting it up so that you can make professional masters starting with your next project. Now, real quick, we have a new membership. New members get 10 free mastered songs, so your next release can sound as good as possible. You also get unlimited feedback on your mixes from us and other community members to get a lot of helpful perspectives quickly, and you get in-depth educational courses to learn both the fundamentals and the nuances of audio engineering. More on this at the end of the video. So, what is this new way to master music? Well, in short, we're using a variation of stem mastering, but we'll do it within the mix session to streamline the process. So, in the mix session, we'll have all of our tracks, all the intended effects, and then each instrument has its relevant bus. So, all of the drums are going to a drum bus, all of the guitars are routed to a guitar bus, and so on. Now, the buses also have all of the relevant effects that we want, so this mix is done in other words. Everything has been affected and processed aside from the stereo output. Now, what I'll do now is solo the instrument groups like the drums and bounce them. We could either solo the bus and export the stem, or we could solo all of the tracks and use the bounce in place function. Either way, we'll import our stems into the mix session and organize them accordingly. Now, to save on CPU, we'll turn off all of the tracks, and in Logic, an on-off function bypasses the effects, but this might look different in your DAW. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to organize the session so that we could only see the stems, but know that the mix session is still in the background, and it could be easily accessed if we need to change anything. Let's quickly listen to the mix that we're working on as I solo some of the stems so that you get a good idea of what we're working with. Next up, let's begin the stem mastering process. So for now, we're going to leave all of the stems at Unity and start with a limiter on the output to protect from overs and avoid monitoring unintended clipping distortion. So while monitoring all of the stems at once, I'm going to start adding some upward processing to the various stems. Now, some personal favorites include the Weiss MM1, Eventide's Omnipressor, and the enhance function of Oxford's limiter. Some free options include Melda Audio's M compressor, which you could use as a custom shape to maximize the signal subtly. Now, with these types of processors, I'll increase the quieter details of each group, making the overall master louder, fuller, and more impressive. Subtle settings will work the best, but you gotta use your ears since what you introduce depends heavily on the source material and the processing that you've already introduced during mixing. So let's take a listen to how this type of processing improves the track. Next, let's add some additional saturation to each stem, and this is going to help create a more complex sound. The type that you choose is entirely up to you, but I find that tape saturation creates a nice emphasis on the mids. If you have Saturn II, you could use something like the Mythical 3D preset to create additional depth if that's needed, but if not, we can achieve something similar later on with mid-side EQ. Now, you might find that you've already added enough saturation to the mix, so feel free to skip this additional saturation, but I have found that very subtle settings at this point will improve the mix. Let's take a quick listen. Next, let's introduce some mild transient expansion to some of the stems. Now, this works great on drums and guitars, but feel free to add it however you see fit. I like a couple of plugins for this, Newfangled Audio's Punctuate and Eventide's Split EQ. With Punctuate, I typically turn off any of the multi-band functions to avoid unneeded phase cancellation. Any transient expander that you have could be used in place of this plugin. Now, Flash by Waves Factory is a great free option. Just be sure to set the mix dial low and to carefully adjust the attack and the sustain to achieve the sound that you want. I find Split EQ works really well if I want to achieve some more texture and hit from the kick drum, so on the drums I'll insert this EQ, create a low shelf transient band, and subtly amplify. Then using the mid-side option, I'll pan the band to the mid-image with just one tick. I found that this dramatically improves the kick and it helps keep the track driving. The trick here is to listen incredibly carefully. Transient expanders can quickly introduce phase cancellation that negates any of the positive effects of the expansion, so subtlety and simplicity with the effects is essential. So let's take a listen to how the master is sounding now. Last up on the stems, we'll use traditional EQ to shape the signals and help them fit together. The processing that we've added so far has altered the frequency responses of our stems, so putting EQ last gives us the control that we need to finalize the sound. If I need to center some of the lows, I could use a mid-side EQ and use a high-pass filter on the side image. This works well if the kick and the bass have moved too far into the side image. Additionally, if the kick and the bass are blurring too much, I could attenuate some of the kick's fundamental on the bass to create a more balanced low end. I often notice that processing on the vocals has added a good amount of signal below its fundamental, so I typically attenuate this with a stereo high-pass filter. If the vocals or anything else is missing some clarity, I could dip 250 Hz and then boost a little of 2.5 to 5 kHz. On the guitars and the synths, a boost to the low mids to mids, usually somewhere between 400 and 1000 Hz on the side image, helps fill them out and gives the overall master a more impressive width without reducing the track's drive or clarity. Now, instead of a parametric EQ, we could use an analog emulation if you were to want some more stylized changes, but something like the Pro Q3 or the free alternative M Equalizer will work well. Now, once everything is shaped and balanced, I'll introduce an exciter if it's needed. Usually the free plugin Fresh Air is a good option. I don't like to use this plugin on the stereo output, but I do find that it sounds great if the settings are tailored to each instrument group. Like most things in this video, the effect is going to be best if it's used subtly. So let's take a listen to the master before we're moving on to our stereo output. Last up for this video, and for our session, let's add some processing to the stereo output. Now, so far, we've only had one limiter serving as protection from clipping, but let's add 1 to 2 other processors, as well as use this limiter to increase the gain. Now, I really enjoy Sonics Oxford's limiter at this point due to the enhance function, but any subtle to moderate maximization is going to work well here. Now, this might not be too relevant to your session, but I try to avoid engaging the limiter function of this plugin since it really smooths out the transients more than I'd like. A longer attack is probably going to help with this. Now, for the actual limiting stage, you'll notice that I'm using this Elephant limiter by Voxingo. It's a personal favorite, and in my opinion, it works a lot better than the FabFilter Pro L2 or any other similar multi-algorithmic limiter. Now, it helps that I can adjust its behavior in the settings window, creating more or less aggressive settings depending on the source material. If you do have a different limiter, that's completely fine, but this isn't too common of a plugin, so I wanted to share it with you in case you're looking for a new limiter. Now, one thing I notice with this setup is that it often makes the master louder than it needs to be, even with moderate settings on the limiter. So some balancing between the levels via the stems, channel faders, and maybe some less aggressive settings might be needed. Now, that's one thing I really like about this setup. With traditional stereo mastering, it can be difficult to get a master loud without it sounding squashed. However, with this method, I find that I have a master that's too loud, and I don't even realize it until I measure, since I don't notice any pumping or unwanted distortion. So let's listen to the final master, and let me know in the comments if you're going to try this method out for yourself. As audio engineers, we want to fulfill our creative potential. We want to know how to achieve a sound quickly and efficiently without having to second-guess ourselves or endlessly revise a production, mix, or master. Having mastered thousands of tracks over the past 20 plus years, we know how important it is to put your best foot forward as an engineer or an artist, but what's even more important is having the resources and the knowledge to create your best work. Now that's why we created the Sage Audio Membership, a collective space where you could have your tracks mastered, engage with a thriving community, and learn the skills you need to take your project from start to finish and be happy with the final result. Now, a membership like this is nothing without a strong community. That's why we're giving 10 free masters to every new member. Our goal is to have as many engineers as possible, sharing their ideas, providing feedback on each other's mixes and masters, and helping to build a place where anyone can learn. To give our members a great foundation for successful projects, we created a 4-hour-long mastering course, starting with fundamentals and ending with mastering chains for specific genres. So far, we've seen and heard great results, with both new engineers and seasoned ones noticing a huge improvement in their mastering. Now, a mixing course will be released next, with more in-depth courses to follow. Now, in the past, you probably shared your mixes and your masters with some friends and fellow musicians, while piecing together often conflicting info from across the internet to try and improve your productions. But with this membership, you have the option to receive feedback on your mixes and your masters from multiple engineers, including Sage Audio engineers. At the same time, you could learn from a coherent, logical, and to-the-point source, giving you the tools that you need to take your productions to a new level. Meanwhile, you could have us master your tracks with your 10 included free masters, as well as 5 additional mastering credits that you'll receive each month. Furthermore, you'll have access to mixed tracks for mastering practice, raw sessions for mixing practice, start-to-finish mixing and mastering chain templates, and plugin presets designed by us. Right now, we're offering a 70% discount for the full membership, bringing the monthly total down to $15. This price is locked in. It won't go up for as long as you're a member. So sign up today to receive your discount and 10 free masters. We're excited to see what you create, and we can't wait to help along the way.